Hi, homilies! Welcome to the Naked Mennonite, a place for the black sheep from any flock. I'm Stephen Harder. Now, anyone who has watched the Netflix documentary Pray Away might come away from it thinking that ex-gay ministries like Exodus International were a one-and-done, flash-in-the-pan phenomena that burned bright and then faded away in the early 2000s. And I wish that were true. I wish those talking points that were so compelling to me back then had just faded away. Or better yet, were seen for what they were. Alas, a quick search on the internet has revealed that they are still around today. Mr. Becket Cook is a conservative, evangelical content creator with a flaming past. And he really sounds like the yin to my yang, you know? Our journeys are directly opposite of each other. So let's dive into his testimony and see if the Holy Spirit is ready to awaken a fire within me.
When I was in elementary school, I started to realize that I was becoming attracted to the same sex. I was like, wait, this is odd, and no one else is feeling this way, and I can't, and no one else can know about this.
Okay, a side note for any gay guy wanting to understand themselves better, I highly recommend you read a book called The Velvet Rage by Alan Downs. He is a clinical psychologist who has spent most of his professional career listening to and helping gay men, and his insights into what makes us tick are amazing. He does a much, much better job than I ever could at explaining these issues. But his paradigm, in a nutshell, is that men grow up in a world that assumes heterosexuality as the norm. From an early age, we recognize that we are different. But because we don't have a framework for that difference, it often manifests itself as feelings of being flawed. We see the world around us. Everyone assumes that males will be this way, and we are not that. And instead of appreciating that there is diversity, we assume that there must be something wrong with us that prevents us from being like everyone else. That is the root of this shame that is part and parcel of growing up in a world that doesn't reflect you. And so much of the gay man's journey in life is shaped by how he responds to that shame of not fitting in, of not being what the world tells him he should be. And first, he tries to hide from it. He goes into the closet, he tries to blend in, he hopes that if he just acts like the straight men around him, these feelings that he's feeling will go away. He'll outgrow them. And then eventually, when that shame says, I will not be ignored, he then tries to outrun it. Once he acknowledges his sexuality, he tries to overcompensate for it, right? He's seeking validation through things like career, success, attractiveness, relationship, status, whatever he needs to do in order to prove his worth, in the hopes that external achievement can cancel out this internal shame, right? I may be different, but look at this. And finally, when that fails him, he has the opportunity to move beyond the shame. He accepts, yes, he is different from the straight world around him, but that difference isn't a flaw. It's not something to rise above. It just is. And it's at this stage that he can find a life that is guided by love, joy, and integrity, rather than a need for external validation. The Velvet Rage, I cannot recommend that book enough. It's given me so many insights on my own journey, and I could resonate with so many of the things that he has observed in his clients and patients. It's an amazing read. Check it out.
When I was a junior in high school, my best friend, we came out to each other. So then I suddenly had this confidant in high school whom I could tell everything to and tell him what I was feeling and what it was like, and he understood, and we could talk.
Oh, wow, what a lucky duck. When I realized that I was attracted to men, I was in a small conservative evangelical community where being gay was a surefire way to exclude yourself from the community. And any teenager asking those types of questions who wanted to find his tribe knew that he better repress those thoughts and keep those questions to himself. Because the alternative is an isolated, lonely experience. And teenagers, above all, are really looking for their place in the world. Really trying to find their tribe. And so that kind of ostracization is especially painful for a teenager to experience. So I am so glad that Becket here found the freedom and a friend to explore that world with. I know that's a hell of a lot better than my friends, who would have made me even more pariah if I had outed myself by asking these questions and admitting that maybe I'm not 100% what you want me to be.
I still felt that being gay was not something that I was going to be for the rest of my life. I just thought, oh, well, eventually I'll get married and have kids and this will just kind of go away.
And yeah, on the one hand, that's the messaging of a heteronormative world, right? This is standard. This is default. Therefore, this is acceptable and correct. It's currently hard-baked into our society, and it's not surprising that he would have assumed that it was the default that they would all eventually fall into. That's what it means to be in a heteronormative world. On the other hand, spoiler alert, maybe sexuality is fluid. Maybe it's on a spectrum. Maybe someone can try being gay for a while to experiment, to find out if this feels right. And if it's not, that's fine too. Sometimes I part my hair in the middle. And then I say, no, this isn't right. This isn't for me. And then I stop parting my hair in the middle. And it's just silly to frame it as inside I have always been and always will be just one sexual thing. And that will never, ever change. What other part of us remains static throughout our entire life? Certainly not something as complex as our sexuality.
When I went to college, I was feeling more and more like homosexuality was becoming my core identity.
I hate this framing so much. Why do Christians insist on it? I think it really belies their own insecurity. Because if they frame the issue as, my core identity is straight, so gays must believe their core identity is gay, then they don't need to entertain the notion that maybe sexuality is on a spectrum. And maybe men can be 1% gay and still be healthy straight men. Because as soon as they entertain that possibility, then they have to do that piece of introspection. And as soon as they are 1% gay, then that means that they lose 1% of their privileges in a heteronormative world. Whereas if they are just 100% straight, then they have nothing to fear, they have nothing to lose. It's when you identify with the other, when you recognize yourself amongst them, that you then begin to question the power structures that keep the oppressed marginalized. It's just wild. If I thought my core identity was gay, I'd have a very shallow life too. Luckily for me, I know that it is just one facet of who I am. And
then after college, I moved to LA, and I got in with a group of friends who were all like-minded. We lived our lives always kind of just wanting two things, and it was success and career, and to find true love.
Yeah, this is exactly what Downs talks about in The Velvet Rage. Many gay men, in an attempt to outrun their shame, chase success, whether it's career, relationships, social status, believing that if they're accomplished enough, then they'll finally feel whole. If they can prove their worth to the world, maybe that internal shame will disappear. Yes, I'm different, but look at this. That's where this trope of the fabulous homosexual comes from, right? That's why we think of gay men who are simply fabulous. They look the best, they have the best taste, they have the best style, they have the best homes, they have the best food. It's all in an attempt to silence that internal shame that says that you are different and that is wrong, that is bad, you are flawed. Because if you are fabulous loud enough, then others won't hear the shame. You won't hear the shame. And the problem is that it doesn't work. No amount of external validation can heal something that was internalized in childhood. Instead, it just fuels this cycle of always needing more success, more admiration, more achievement, without ever addressing the root of the shame itself.
I think I had a total of five serious relationships, and they were all very intense and very real. And every time I was in one of these relationships, it was like, okay, this is the one. Like, this is the guy who is gonna give me meaning in my life. This is the person that's gonna save me. Like, I seriously saw them as almost like a messiah. Like, this person will give my life meaning.
Ugh, yuck. Yeah, that is so unhealthy. Absolutely. I wouldn't want that either. In fact, I did that too, except with Jesus. I saw him as this messianic figure who would save me, because the Christians around me told me I was broken. And because I was young and vulnerable, I believed them. When you abuse the trust of a child, you abuse the child.
I'll have a reason to live. Like, I put so much pressure on these relationships.
Right, but that's not a gay thing, right? Like, straight people do that too, you know? You know, it's being framed as this scenario of being gay was so toxic and unfulfilling, but there's nothing inherently gay about what's being described. Queers have unhealthy relationships. Straights have unhealthy relationships. Straights can have healthy relationships, and so can queer folk. What's being described here is not unique to being gay. If anything, it's commonplace among people who are immature, people who have yet to develop a nuanced understanding of themselves and their relationships. That's what's really going on here, not the evils of being gay.
And so during all this time in Hollywood, I did everything. I went to all the premieres, I went to the Oscars, the Emmys, the Grammys, and I went to the governor's ball after the Oscars, and like, that life I was living was it was satisfying. It was fun, and I kind of felt like high from it. I was at one of the after parties one night, and like, everyone was dancing and all the people in the fashion world were there, and it was like very glamorous, and I just remember just looking out over the sea of people all having the times of their lives, and I just felt so empty and dead inside.
Yeah, I understand this, and that does sound very hollow, devoid of meaning, right? And it's not inherently gay. It's as if, like, all the straight men at that party felt filled and alive because of the women they'd share a bed with that night. No. They are all too likely to also feel that emptiness if they reflected upon it. The difference is, Becket ended up pinning all of that shallowness on his sexuality and reinforcing the shame that he had already internalized. Because if you blame it on something outward, like who you're having sex with, then you don't need to do the internal work of addressing your shame.
I felt so alone and just empty.
Sounds like someone, like all of us, needs healthy community. I wonder what would have happened if this guy would have stopped attending those parties and, I don't know, volunteered at a homeless shelter that helped queer youth who had been disowned and kicked out of their homes by their families. Helping others who are less fortunate, less privileged than himself. Plan B, I guess, would probably be something like join a homophobic church and then demonize and demean marginalized at-risk folk, which happens to include queer youth. But what are the odds of that happening? Well, I really thought I could do it. I thought that because this was a shorter video, I would have less to say, and I could do this all in one round, but I was wrong. We've got to take a pause. I need to go pursue my shallow, meaningless existence for a little bit and come back to this next week. But I'm so curious to know if the Holy Spirit is going to finally move within me once again, and I can feel the presence of God. Maybe I will see His holiness. We shall see. Until then, this is Stephen Harder reminding you that underneath our clothes, we are all naked. I'll see you next time.